Usually when we think about keeping records, it's really a defensive act.
Oh, totally.
Like, think about the last time you kept a receipt or organized your tax documents. You put them in a shoebox or maybe a digital folder, right?
Yeah, correctly.
And you do it so that if the IRS ever comes knocking, you can defensively prove that you followed their rules.
Right. It's entirely about compliance.
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically bracing for an audit. You're just preparing to survive someone else's scrutiny.
But imagine flipping that entire concept on its head. What if your personal records, like your notes, your timestamps, your meticulously documented truth, what if that was the only offensive weapon you had against a system actively trying to erase you?
Wow. Yeah.
Suddenly, that shoebox of receipts isn't just, administrative paperwork. It becomes literal armor.
I love that. You step out of the role of the audited and you become the auditor.
Exactly. And that shift in mindset, that's the mission of today's deep dive. We are exploring the hidden mechanics of systemic pressure and just the sheer undeniable force of personal resilience.
It's an incredible topic.
It really is. And we're doing it by unpacking a single fascinating memoir. It's titled CROOKWITHOUTACRIME, a story of justice in San Francisco, written by Mark Adam Cottenham.
And the scope of his story is just staggering.
The core premise here centers on a 6'5" Black man, an entrepreneur born and raised in San Francisco's Hunters Point. He documents facing 176 felony arrests over a few decades.
Yeah, let that number sink in for a second.
176 arrests, and yet he walked away without a single conviction.
Which is, that's a statistical anomaly that immediately demands our attention. Yeah. And just to lay our cards on the table for everyone listening, as we get into this, we are exploring Cottenham's perspective straight from his own text.
Right.
We'll be reporting on his very serious allegations regarding the San Francisco Police Department, the District Attorney's Office, the medical system, and even his own family. We're not here to play judge or jury or to endorse any political sides.
Absolutely not.
Our goal is strictly to analyze the mechanics of his survival strategy based purely on his lived experience in the book.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you're listening to this and wondering how someone survives the psychological weight of 176 arrests, well, you really have to understand how he built his life in the first place.
Yeah, you have to start at the foundation.
Exactly. This is a masterclass in refusing to be rooted in toxic soil. And for Cottenham, that foundation started at age 16. He didn't get a bank loan. He got a 1969 Chevy Caprice.
And he didn't just drive it either.
Yeah.
This car had a massive 427 engine and a slapstick shifter.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he bought it, spent the time to, restore its dignity, and then flipped it to a next-door neighbor named Bryant for pure profit.
And that transaction, it just flips a switch in his brain. He realizes he can bypass the traditional economy completely. He scales this into what he calls the under a grand empire.
The under a grand empire.
Yeah. He essentially built a decentralized, cash-based microeconomy decades before, Silicon Valley tech bros were pitching those exact concepts.
The mechanics of it are really brilliant in their simplicity. Like, he would go to local car auctions on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, targeting the overlooked inventory.
The stuff nobody else wanted.
Right. Old Hondas, Toyotas, outdated limousines. He was buying them for $200 or $300.
He'd clean them up until they looked respectable, and then he'd take white shoe polish and write prices like $850 or $950 directly on the tinted windows.
Which is genius.
High volume, low margin, all cash, and completely independent from traditional banking.
Right. But that independence created an intense ideological friction, particularly within his own family. Cottenham grew up in a household of what he calls workers.
Right, with a traditional mindset.
Exactly. In their minds, if you didn't clock in somewhere, if you didn't receive a formal paycheck with a boss's signature on it, you weren't actually working. You were just hustling. His family looked down on his entrepreneurial drive because it lacked that traditional institutional validation.
He had to make a choice very early on between familial approval and true financial independence. And he chose independence. He chose to be the architect of his own time.
And he was incredibly disciplined about it, too.
Oh, absolutely. He even found a logistical glitch in the city's nightlife and filled it by starting a designated driver service.
The logistics of that service were fascinating. Like, if you were intoxicated at a bar, he wouldn't just pick you up in a taxi.
Right.
He would have his fleet follow him, and he would drive you home in your own car.
Which is brilliant, saving you from the risk of a DUI or that massive expense of having your car towed and impounded.
Yeah. His reputation for honesty in that service became ironclad. I mean, the streets trusted him. Rank-and-file SFPD officers from the Broadway station and allegedly even the police chief's own daughter used his service.
He became a fixture in the city.
But here is where we see the double-edged sword of success, That level of trust and visibility inevitably brings scrutiny. When you operate outside the traditional, easily monitored financial systems, well, the authorities take notice.
Oh, they definitely noticed, especially when he upgraded his operation. He bought this massive RV to serve as his mobile headquarters, and he parked it right at 11th and Market.
Right in the open.
Exactly. So picture this. You have a 6'5" black man operating with immense, unregulated liquidity right out in the open in San Francisco.
And to the system he describes, a black man with that much mobility and cash who doesn't answer to a boss or a bank, he isn't seen as a successful entrepreneur.
No.
He's viewed as an anomaly that needs to be corrected.
Yeah.
And this is where the systemic friction begins, leading to what Cottenham refers to as the National Negro Roundup.
Which brings us to the architecture of attrition. Cottenham claims the SFPD and the DA utilized a strategy of paper attrition to drain his wealth, since they couldn't actually catch him committing a crime.
Yeah, paper attrition.
Oh, wait, I have to stop here. Walk me through the logic on this. Because if he was genuinely never doing anything illegal, how could the police justify spending so much time, paperwork, and taxpayer resources arresting one guy 176 times?
What's fascinating here is that it sounds impossible until you look at the specific legal mechanics of his environment. Cottenham outlines two distinct tactics they used: the bail-go-round and the 30-day stall.
Okay, break those down.
Let's look at the math of the bail-go-round. They would arrest him on a Friday night, he called it the weekend special, for a minor or entirely fabricated ghost charge.
A ghost charge?
Yeah, something like a broken taillight that wasn't actually broken. And then they set his bail extremely high, say $20,000.
Okay, so he pays a bail bondsman the standard 10%, so $2,000, and gets out. He's out $2,000, which hurts, but he goes back to his lot to keep his business alive.
Right, but a week later they arrest him again while he is actively out on bail.
Wait, and that triggers a completely different legal trap, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Under a specific law he cites, California Penal Code Section 12022 Type 1, getting arrested while already out on bail triggers an on-bail enhancement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it mandates strict hold times and bypasses standard bail rules.
Oh.
So when they arrested him that second time, the previous $2,000 he paid was functionally gone.
Just gone.
Gone. He'd have to find another $2,000 to get out again. And they did this 5-10 times in a row.
So the system essentially turns the act of posting bail into a subscription model for his own freedom.
Precisely. The goal of these ghost charges was never to get a guilty verdict in front of a jury. The goal was the warehouse.
Just locking him up.
Right, keeping him locked in a holding cell just long enough that his cash flow would completely bleed out, his business would collapse, and his cars could be legally towed, seized, and auctioned off by the city for their own profit.
It's a brutal economic war of attrition. But, this is where Cottenham's strategy gets brilliant, because he didn't hire a defense attorney.
No, he couldn't trust them. He suspected the local lawyers were too intertwined with the DA's office to actually fight for him. So he represented himself in court pro se.
And because the police would allegedly raid his office before a hearing and conveniently, lose his car titles to claim he was operating as an illegal dealer, Cottenham created shadow files. He audited the police right back.
Yeah, he turned their harassment into actionable data. A shadow file isn't just a folder, it's a weaponized bureaucracy.
I love that phrase.
He recorded badge numbers, dispatch times, contradictions in their police reports, and inconsistencies in their warrants.
There's this one incredible moment in the book that perfectly captures this dynamic. He's facing life without the possibility of parole. A high-powered lawyer from the Civic Center comes down to his holding cell, pushes settlement papers across the table, and offers him a deal just to quietly leave the building.
Right, just take the deal.
Yeah. But Cottenham asks a highly technical, sharp procedural question based on his shadow files. The lawyer doesn't answer. Instead, the lawyer reaches across the table, picks up Cottenham's glasses, and meticulously inspects the hinges and the bridge.
Looking for a hidden microphone.
Yes, the cognitive dissonance is amazing. The system literally could not compute that a man from Hunter's Point, without a formal law degree, was outsmarting them with sheer intellect and data.
They couldn't believe it.
They genuinely believed he had to be wearing a wire, because how else could he be documenting their systemic fraud so perfectly?
It's a profound display of what he calls his investigative intelligence. But, we have to recognize that a machine like that doesn't just give up when it loses in court. It adapts.
Right.
If they couldn't legally take his freedom through paper attrition, they decided to escalate. They went after his health, his property, and his bloodline.
Yeah, the system realizes they can't beat his shadow files in a courtroom. The paper attrition is failing. So if you can't bankrupt the man's business, what's left? You go after his biology and his family. Cottenham refers to this escalation as the pincer move.
And the physical toll of this front is terrifying. While he was in custody in Redwood City, Cottenham alleges the medical staff subjected him to what he calls chemical subjugation.
Chemical subjugation.
Yes. They forced him to take a psychiatric medication called Lexapro without ever checking his medical history or his allergies.
Oh my God. His body instantly rejected it. He went into a severe cardiac reaction and had to be rushed into emergency surgery while still in custody to have a heart stent put in.
In a holding cell, basically.
And the timing here is what makes it feel so suffocating. While he is literally on an operating table fighting for his life, the city is allegedly floors below, finalizing the eviction for his personal sanctuary at the Civic Center Hotel and auctioning off his Mercedes.
It's incredibly dark. And that's just the physical front of the pincer move. The back of the move, the true psychological warfare, was what he calls the back war.
The family betrayal.
Yes. While he was locked in this continuous, chaotic cycle of arrests and hospitalizations, his own brother used the situation to file for custody of Cottenham's son, DeMarcus.
That is just brutal.
Cotton alleges this move had absolutely nothing to do with the child's welfare. It was a calculated financial maneuver.
Oh, because of the money.
Exactly. By taking custody of the son, the brother positioned himself as the legal gatekeeper to a $405,000 family inheritance.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about this in terms of historical warfare. This is exactly like a medieval siege.
How so?
Well, if the enemy army can't breach your castle walls, which in this case is Cottenham continually winning his trials in the courtroom, they don't pack up and go home. They poison the water supply, which is the orchestrated medical incident, and then they turn the king's own family against him to starve him out financially and emotionally.
That is a very accurate mechanism for his experience. They weaponized his familial bonds to try and break his spirit. They even scheduled a family court date for the custody battle and demanded he appear in front of the judge in a prison-issued orange jumpsuit, wearing heavy chains around his waist and ankles.
They wanted his son to see him as a defeated criminal.
They wanted to liquidate his stature as a father.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you not break under that level of coordinated pressure? If we look at his foundation, Cottenham credits his early days as an altar boy. But he wasn't just any altar boy. He was chosen by the archdiocese to serve the Pope at St. Mary's Cathedral.
Oh, wow. Which requires an immense amount of discipline.
Precisely. He learned what he calls Vatican precision. It's the psychological ability to stay perfectly calm, stand tall, and execute the protocol flawlessly while the entire world is watching and judging you. He applied that exact same discipline to the family court trap. He flat out refused to leave his cell. He chose to lose the custody battle in absentia, rather than let his son's last memory of him be a man in shackles. He sacrificed the immediate battle to preserve his dignity and his ultimate stature as a father.
It's an incredible display of willpower. But surviving that siege leads Cottenham to a massive epiphany. He realizes that winning these individual battles, beating 176 charges one by one, is ultimately pointless if the war itself never ends.
Yeah.
If the soil around you is permanently poisoned, you can't just keep weeding the garden, you have to change the map entirely.
Which leads to his overarching philosophy of the 90-mile trap. He observed that most people live, work, and die within a 90-mile radius of where they were born.
They get stuck.
Right. They become rooted in place, asking permission from bosses, relying on systems that ultimately don't care about them, and never looking past the horizon.
He calls them cabbages, and identifying as an Aries tiger, he decides he wasn't built to be a cabbage.
No, definitely not.
The catalyst for this escape was the sudden passing of his mother in 2015. She was his anchor. After she died, he saw the vultures circling his estate, and he made a definitive architectural masterstroke. Within 12 days, he liquidated his entire physical life in San Francisco. He stepped off the game mod entirely.
He relocated to Thailand, which he affectionately refers to as the kingdom. But this raises a fascinating practical question, right?
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for his wealth? How do you take a cash-in-hand physical car empire and translate that wealth globally to a completely new map?
It's wild because a street-level hustler from Hunter's Point intuitively understood the core ethos of decentralized finance decades before anyone else. He knew the blockchain was the ultimate shadow file ledger that a local DA couldn't raid and, just lose.
Exactly. He applied that same investigative intelligence to the digital realm. While in Thailand, he observed the rise of cryptocurrency. Specifically, during the massive BitConnect crash where thousands of people panicked and lost everything following the group mind, Cottenham stayed analytical.
He kept that Vatican precision.
Yes. Think about it. If you survive the SFPD trying to erase you, an emergency heart surgery in a holding cell, a little market volatility isn't going to shake you. He didn't run. He used dollar cost averaging, buying the dips when everyone else was selling at a panic, to build a decentralized portfolio.
He became his own untouchable bank.
His wealth scaled to the point where that $405,000 inheritance his brother took, he now refers to it as mere pocket change.
That is amazing. And the picture of him today is just a beautiful testament to that resilience. Cottenham is 63 years old. He is living in absolute prosperity in Thailand with his Sagittarius dog wife of 10 years.
A great team.
Yeah, they travel in a brand new truck. He communicates regularly with his grandchildren, acting as this legendary patriarch who calls from across the globe. The authorities even tried one last time, temporarily deporting him back to the U.S. in 2012. A massive overreach, he calls, a global 30-day stall. But he survived that too, eventually making his way right back to his paradise.
He outcalculated the system by realizing that their power only works if you agree to stay in their cage.
So let's bring this all together. Cottenham's story challenges you to look at your own shadow files. Are you documenting your value? Are you keeping your receipts?
Right.
Or are you relying entirely on a system, a boss, or institutions that could turn on you at any moment? Are you building your own internal architecture?
It demands that we perform a profound audit on our own dependencies. Cottenham survived because his self-worth and his financial structures were eventually made entirely independent of the institutions that tried to break him.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on today. We just spent a lot of time talking about Cottenham's literal 90-mile trap, the physical geography of San Francisco that he had to systematically escape. But what about the invisible, psychological 90-mile traps we build for ourselves?
That's a great question.
If the industry you work in, the social circles you run in, or the very city you live in requires you to constantly defend your basic right to exist and succeed. Wait, let me phrase that better. If those things require you to constantly fight for your existence, what would happen if you just stopped fighting their rigged game?
Yeah.
What would happen if you stopped defensively sorting your receipts just to survive their audit and instead took all of that energy and built your own kingdom on a completely different map?